Welcome to Beyond the Text with me, Samuel Woodall.
And me, Jack Thomson.
Excellent, both of us in person again. And it's amazing that we've worn the same outfit since last week, isn't it, Jack?
It's incredible.
No, I don't know.
Coordination.
I don't know how we've managed to do that, and we do actually have more than one pair of clothes each. So,
but
yeah.
no more.
But no more. We're very frugal. We're very Puritan. I've influenced Jack in my ways. But what we are going to do is we're going to run a fantastic session inspired by a colleague of ours, Derek Van Voorst. So I thought I'd name drop him for anyone who wants to be inspired from Dalhousie and St Andrews, Canadian and Scottish academia at its finest with our young friend.
Oh, indeed. Yes.
Who inspired us into reading de Maistre,
Indeed.
and certainly has had a big impact on you,
Very.
both Derek and de Maistre.
Yeah, yes, it's true. I only heard of Maistre. I don't really know why. One of those names that's just in the mind, right? And I was so impressed. I count Maistre as the foremost modern apologist for this very peculiar concept of providence. I don't think anyone ever explained it with such, from a philosophical point of view, with such clarity.
Yeah.
And ever undermined the common criticism with such precision and I would say finality, but there's always room for new arguments to come. But I think Maistre's formidable, and I think far more persuasive on this subject than Augustine.
Yeah.
Even though they are arguing for the same thing, I think the thinking on this subject hasn't had quite a lot of time to develop. He benefits from a whole 1,500 years, really.
Yeah.
In addition to Augustine.
And he's quite famous, if anyone has heard of him, he's quite famous for his coinage that is used often these days as a kind of political coinage, that every country has the government it deserves, which is interesting, and we shall explore further as to whether that's an accurate representation of his beliefs. But this is often cited in terms of this kind of realist sort of like, well, you put it there, or you accepted it, or you live by it. That we shall explore how far Joseph de Maistre can be trapped by that phrase. But what's his background as intellectual formation? Well, I mean, this is a session led by Jack, but I know that he was born in Chambéry in Savoy, into a Catholic, royalist, administrative elite.
Yes.
Jack, please.
Yes.
Riff off of me.
His father worked for the court, legislative court, not necessarily legal court. So Maistre actually studied law. So he studied law in Turin, in Italy, which was part of the I forget the name of the monarchy. So there were several names that come with the Piedmontese monarchy. Who employed his father. What's the geography of that? Does that include?
Piedmont does come down into northern Italy from southern France.
So this is Piedmontese dynasty. So it was natural that he would study there. It also includes Savoy.
Yeah, and where his father was a senator.
Exactly. So now Savoy is relevant because that's where later Joseph de Maistre himself begins his diplomatic career. So he joined, after his studies, he joined the magistrature, hard word, in Chambéry. During that time, until the revolution in 1792, at least until that year, I think the revolution begins a couple of years before, right? Yeah. So until a little bit into the revolution, he's very much involved in Freemasonry and the Masonic circles, and very interested in the doctrines of Illuminism. So basically the sort of Enlightenment style of Gnosticism. Which is
Gnosticism
being many things. So some general pointers, the view that knowledge is salvific. So that the answer to the fundamental human question lies in not in an act as such, but the possession of a certain kind of knowledge. So you have all kinds of cults that form around that. So that's not the Christian view. So
that was something I omitted to mention in the Augustinian one, that actually his rebuttal is a fight against Gnosticism.
That's one of the important points there. So Christianity isn't a faith of that knowledge saves, but that Jesus Christ saves. So that's the important point. It also therefore involves, by nature, a dualism of the mind and body, which is quite problematic. So it has some roots in Platonic sort. Is Plato a Gnostic? Debatable. Moving on. Maistre does resign this line of thinking. He quits Freemasonry, started to take his faith more seriously from the more or less from the turning point of the revolution onwards. His first publications are defences, treatises in defence of hereditary monarchy. The first of these is a philosophical political argument. The second is a theological argument, and they're written about 4 years apart. And while he's in sort of hiding, really. He tried to get employed in Turin to the monarch, but somebody reveals that he's the author of this pamphlet, and he no longer gets that job. But he does then get employed in Sardinia to be the ambassador.
When he's in exile. 1792 or something.
Later, I think. So eventually he does find himself employed by the Russian government. Ambassador of Sardinia to the Tsar. I guess he's employed by the Sardinian government. I guess. Okay. So, and it's in Russia that he writes the St. Petersburg dialogue, and that's his main work. It's in the wonderful tradition of philosophical dialogue, where you have characters who are meeting for conversations and exploring a variety of themes. Their literary quality is the highest. It's very thematically dense. It's funny. It's witty. It's philosophically incisive, and it covers a whole range of themes. But they're united by this core idea that Maistre says he's writing to justify the ways of God to man. So the main theme is providence and justice.
And I think it's important that he's also not writing in the context of this was brought up about my figure Rapin, which actually, although he comes to very different conclusions, he lives at a time of financial precarity, which de Maistre also does, and he's also writing very much within aristocratic salons and this kind of network of patrons, but even though they're aristocratic, what is important is he's not writing in that kind of institutional academic style, I guess. He's writing very much within a milieu of interested, but kind of like essentially almost for the layman, but obviously a learned layman.
Oh, of course, very much. He does address himself to the learned layman, putting it. He's very conscious of style. He spent many years during the revolution quite conscious, and also during his career as a magistrate, consciously refining his style and practicing that.
He writes about when he flees to Sardinia, the letters of d'un royaliste Savoisien.
Letters d'un royaliste Savoisien.
Defending hereditary monarchy on political rational grounds, but later judged as insufficient, as they concede too much to my realm, to Enlightenment rationalism.
Exactly, that's the important point I forgot to mention. So the reason he rewrites it with a theological argument in mind is because he realises that in giving just a political or philosophical argument, he buys into the basic premise of Enlightenment, Illuminism, and of Gnosticism, which he's realising is really mistaken.
Excellent.
So,
and I think we can see him as this counter-Enlightenment figure. I mean, these hyphenated terms are very difficult to I guess, almost justify really using. I mean, I guess he is a good example of counter-Enlightenment thought, but then you would also have someone like Jean-Jacques Rousseau positioned as a counter-Enlightenment thinker. So, yeah.
Yes, for very different reasons.
Exactly. Does he mention
Rousseau? Yes, he does.
He does. In a semi-praising way, whilst kind of... Yeah, yes. I do remember this.
Yes.
In a semi-praising way.
Yes. It's in the second chapter of the St. Petersburg dialogue. The second dialogue deals with Rousseau's state of nature.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting. It sort of indicates the breadth of the book, and really the challenge for any interpreter to see what on earth unites these themes and these investigations. He does talk about Rousseau, especially the state of nature, and the question he basically raises is, why do we see the primitive societies as the origin point of culture and language? He thinks it makes far more sense to view them as the vestiges of prior civilizations.
Yes, yeah.
And so in this way, you can understand this chapter as connecting original sin to culture. So what our anthropologists are actually finding are the human and cultural consequences of original sin.
Yeah.
The primitive, the barbarian in his language is a man who's fallen to the lowest possible state in this world. He's lost language. He's lost religion.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting.
So it's like no one had ever argued that.
Yeah, at all.
That is so original. I don't think anyone's ever argued that. But it's a very serious argument. He spends pages giving etymological analysis of Latin, Greek, and French to make this argument.
Yes.
To sort of show how the structure of language indicates that a primitive language would not be the beginning of something, but the fragmentation. It's really quite peculiar.
Yes, and I think it's peculiar, this whole Russian thing is peculiar, because obviously Russia does go through a period of enlightened despotism, and there is this kind of idea that it's part of the Enlightenment, but then by the 19th century, Russia lags behind massively in terms of any social reform, so Russia is quite a backward-looking country, all the way up until the revolution, when you still have serfdom in the 20th century, so Russia's not moving forward particularly quickly. So I'm intrigued how much this kind of level of sort of, I guess, suffering really across the board in Russia may have impacted his thought in terms of providential intervention. But let's get to these St. Petersburg dialogues anyway. They're 11 fictional dialogues. Their central aim is to justify God's ways to man. The core problem that he's grappling with is providence. How can suffering, injustice, war and violence coexist with divine justice?
Yes.
There's a strong continuity with the Augustinian providential history that we've been discussing, especially in the City of God. The rise and fall of empires is moral, intelligible, within divine order. These are all things that de Maistre is grappling with in this age of kind of counter-enlightenment. And obviously, for those who maybe don't know so much about the Enlightenment is this period spanning, let's say, from the 1680s to the 1780s, in which there's a development of science, of rationalism, arguably a turn away from religion and towards that which we can understand in the world. Obviously, these are things that we could do a whole podcast on, debating whether or not the Enlightenment is any of these things, whether it is anything at all, whether it's just different moments, different people. But across Europe, there's this republic of letters, different intellectuals engaging in these techniques. Usually then against it you have this concept of the counter-enlightenment posed. Often counter-enlightenment scholars, however, are using the tools of the Enlightenment to their own ends. So how far one can differentiate counter-enlightenment scholars from enlightenment scholars is obviously questionable, because they're engaging in these networks, these techniques, these sorts of things. So that's a little bit of situating these texts. Let's turn to providence as a conceptual framework.
Yes, so he takes Augustine, and not explicitly, but just for the sake of continuity of this podcast, he very much has the same view of providence that Augustine has. It's the mystery of how God works in the hearts of people and in the circumstances of the world to maximise or to make possible salvation in principle for all people. This corresponds only very loosely to any utilitarian sense of maximising the good. It's not quite that. Because it's not computable. And it's relative to the particular needs of individuals and communities and societies. I mean, it's an impossible problem for a man to compute. And nevertheless, this is the experience of people. And also that it's possible to read history in this way. Arguably, at least people have tried to make that case, Augustine being one of the earliest. Herodotus in his own mythic way, an even earlier example. Okay, so the first dialogue just deals with, straight off the bat, a series of objections to providence, which I think many of us will recognise today, especially after New Atheism, and many of these arguments coming back up again. So, first of all, why should good men suffer? Why should evil men not suffer? This is the first question. And Maistre begins, I mean...
which we can call moral evil as a broad sort of
term. Well, this is more in response to natural evil, actually, I would suggest.
I guess for a new atheist, though, natural evil would be like, why is there suffering in a forest when... That's why I'm just discerning.
No, but this is...
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's sort of in between the two.
I mean, I guess it involves both, but
we're also collectively mapping on terms, so we don't need to worry too much.
But the distinction has been in the literature since Aquinas, I think.
I guess so.
So it's not the whole. I think the question is first and foremost raised by natural evil, and also by moral evil. But I think moral evil has more of an explanation in God's permissive will of the freedom of the other to do good and ill. To choose good, without that choice there is no meaning to good and evil. So moral evil actually is way easier to justify. Natural evil seems less. Why do some people get cancer and others not? For example. And Maistre's first point straight away is to distinguish injustice and misfortune. Suffering is not injustice. It is misfortune, and it's misfortune because it's not intrinsically related to one's moral state. It's actually almost a liberating thing. Suffering, in principle, prioritises neither the good nor the evil. So it's not a question of justice. And then Augustine will say, I know Maistre will say in his own way, but we remember Augustine talking about temporal suffering as an opportunity for sanctification. And that's something that's available to everyone.
A sense of adversity to the virtue.
Almost. So with this dissociation from the question of justice, you have now a question of opportunity and responsibility. To take responsibility for your own salvation. Using opportunities that come in your life to grow in virtue. I mean, to give basic examples, how do you grow in patience if you are not tested? How do you grow in courage if you do not face scary things? And difficult things. So this is part of the logic there, and that's available to everybody regardless of what they've done. Which also then means that the people who have committed the most moral evil also have that same possibility. So it's a remarkable result to dissociate these things. Redemption truly is universal. Okay, that's the first problem that he deals with. He then has to say, okay, so does suffering accrue to the people who do evil in general, or does it accrue to the people who do good, or does it not accrue to anybody in general? So, in effect, is suffering a punishment? In a general way, is suffering a punishment? Do bad people tend to suffer more? Conversely, are good people in general more immune to suffering? This is the next question he raises, and he's not so happy with this way of thinking either, because it tends to view happiness as a reward for virtue. And if virtue has a temporal reward, it's no longer virtue.
Because it's in attaining something.
It's now a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. That's objection number 2 dealt with. he, related to a point I made a moment ago, he argues that God is not morally culpable for the fact of natural and moral evil because he's not the direct author.
Yes.
So it's not it can't be viewed as a punishment. It's his permissive will as I mentioned, reflecting his respect for human freedom.
Yes, this is where that whole free will debate enters this discussion in terms of you have to be able to leave room for free will to operate, and thereby these ills can be.
Yeah, I mean, and a very simple way of understanding this is like if you know, a lot of these things I think become clearer when you consider like very human analogies. I mean, you think of like how a father and his son will interact. His father and his child. I mean, if the father intervenes in everything that could harm the son,
it won't learn.
It won't learn anything, and it won't ever become responsible. It won't become a person.
Yeah, exactly. It won't become sensible and aware.
Yes, and therefore, and in that point, there's no real relationship.
Yes.
There's no real virtue. There's neither is there vice. There's just nothing. It's flat. There's no vitality. There's nothing in that world. There's no.
So values. Therefore, suffering itself is a good.
It's an opportunity.
Is it a good though?
No. We have to be careful, because suffering isn't original to the creation in this view of the world.
Yeah.
Though suffering isn't essential for happiness, because happiness ultimately is found in the beatific vision.
But there is a bit of a fetishization of suffering.
There is. Which is a bit of a danger. Which is a danger in many writers, because the cross is very central to the Christian faith. But it can easily become a kind of obsession over suffering. But the important point to remember is, and I think Maistre does understand this at some level, even if in his literary genius gets a bit carried away at times, especially in this chapter we'll study subsequently. The important thing to realise is that suffering in itself does not afford happiness, does not afford salvation.
No,
it's an opportunity, but it has to be engaged with for the right reasons. If you're engaging with suffering out of pride, this is a new depths of moral evil that's emerging.
He's not advocating some life like an aesthete of kind of crawling on one's back to a temple or this kind of thing, or puritanical self-flagellation.
Many people carry these images of Christian asceticism, and they're woefully unrealistic. And I mean, people think like the flagellants of the Middle Ages are sort of the pinnacle of atonement, and they're really not. In terms of how the Church views these things, flagellation is not regarded as a particularly remarkable expression of piety and asceticism.
Yeah, completely.
Because I mean, to say that it is to completely misunderstand what suffering is in relationship to salvation. Because fundamentally, salvation is not something I can gain by my own effort.
Exactly.
If it was, I would just do that all day. But then it completely contradicts the sense in which the body is good.
And the relationship, as we've said, between virtue and suffering is somewhat removed in doing that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it just becomes this expression of self-hatred. The Christian revelation is about discovering the true sense of self-love.
And I think this discussion of violence leads to his discussion of the executioner as the image of divine justice.
Yes, this is a really strange image, and it already takes us into, I think, the main chapter we want to discuss, which is chapter 7. Unless it comes up in chapter 1, I can't remember, but chapter 7 is more well known. It's a dialogue about war, and because this is a project about justifying God's ways to man, he has to make an argument for why war is somehow compatible with God's justice and providence. I mean, for these basic reasons, we can already see why, but war is it's a very
providential phenomenon.
Well, exactly. He had to deal with them. So, and war is quite interesting for Maistre. He seems to give it a certain privileged place in human experience. As a particular instrument of divine providence, not just as something that's merely compatible, but as something that's compatible in a very special way, maybe even an instrument of divine providence. And the purpose of the chapter is to mystify war.
It can't be understood rationally.
Yeah.
Which actually is a very astute point to make at the time of the Enlightenment, because my old professor Richard Watmore sort of said imperial conquest and war is the thing that kills Enlightenment. So it's quite interesting that him as a counter-Enlightenment scholar
very interesting.
is raising this point that war isn't rational. It's almost an accidental realization of like where the Enlightenment ultimately will die in war.
And why do you think that is? Or?
Because virtue becomes a sort of emblem to justify war for imperialist nations in Europe, and the original conception of the virtues and moral order that Enlightenment scholars were trying to unpack and understand becomes a kind of shield for imperial conquest.
That's close to Augustine.
Yeah, and sort of removes the actual soul and content of virtue by using it as a weak sort of shell for conquest.
Okay, so virtue is seen instrumentally.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would be so you would connect that to the Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment is about turning ethics, say, into tools of reason.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And then you get an instrumentalist ethics and guide to it.
Okay,
that's very interesting. So Maistre's approach to showing I wouldn't say the irrationality of war, but the supra-rationality of war.
Right.
That's really the aim. It's to say that it's above reason, not below it.
Yeah.
That's quite important. He begins with a comparison between the soldier and the executioner, as you gestured to. And the executioner, I think, does recur in an earlier book, I can't remember where, as an emblem of divine justice. In this chapter, it serves to show that, on the one hand, the soldier is an arm of the state who executes military personnel in a lawful way.
Yeah.
The other executes civilians in a lawful way. One is a very heroic figure. The other is a figure that's quite neatly reviled on the whole. People tend not to be fond of executioners. It's quite there's a little stigma there.
Yeah.
Reasonably. But it's interesting that in one case, one of the most honourable thing in Maistre's line is to be able to take innocent life innocently. One of the most honourable things in the world is that.
Yeah.
And war is the context in which that's appropriate. But the executioner, by contrast, is suddenly isn't.
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which justice is quite messy. And alien to human intuition.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing he lays out. I mean, these things aren't ultimately resolved, but the purpose of this chapter is to raise all of these doubts.
And there's a long history. We won't delve into it massively, but I was just thinking about it in terms of the executioner as a figure, both in the West and further afield. That the executioner sits awkwardly in society because it's necessary for justice.
Yes.
The executioner often sat at a sort of strange level of authority alongside the ruler, in essence, because they were directly paid by whoever the ruler was. They often were given the best spreads of food and this sort of thing, but in society they were marginalised because they were obviously seen as this kind of final act giver in society. So they were often marginalised and sitting outside of broader society whilst coming from it.
Yes.
There was almost in sort of Eastern culture the idea that they were the purifier because they took on all the guilt of society.
Wow.
And purified it back to a more sanctified state.
It's a very interesting image.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the Catholic Church comes out against capital punishment in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. So Maistre predates this. But it comes out against it because by this stage there are now alternatives.
Yes.
It's more possible to rehabilitate people because of what we know about psychology, but also just the basic infrastructure and so forth. That's also interesting to note. So that there is some substance to people's revulsion, I think, at this role, but certainly historically speaking, there's this very dirty job that but does purify the society.
And somewhat engages with the divine in that way.
Well, in a way, because it's always been recognised in these kind of cultures as a divine function to play with life in this way, to hold life in one's hands. From the beginning of the Old Testament, there's an injunction against taking the life of another.
Yeah.
Now, in the law, that is worked around, but obviously the biblical hermeneutics is always how God condescends into the difficult circumstances of human affairs. Okay. The chapter proceeds to discuss war itself and raises several peculiarities and oddities about wars that should raise our questions. Why is it that in war so many advances in technology and medicine are made? Why is it that we see so many virtues on display, in like healthcare? Or the respect, like how these armies will wage war with one another, but they will go home for Christmas and Easter.
Yes, yeah. Or have a truce on Christmas Day.
I mean, it happened in World War One. Yeah, that's quite a remarkable occasion. How it is that when is it that a war is lost?
Yes, exactly. Is it a total war? Is it a battle, a geographically constrained battle? These kind of concepts.
Yeah, exactly. And he concludes that a battle is lost when one lets fear enter the heart.
Yeah.
So that's the spirit of unreason, let's say.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Something about participants as well, am I right? That who is participating in war, because a soldier on soldier battle has honour, has glory, these things that have been being discussed, but it's looked at differently when the soldier is going rampaging and pillaging through citizens.
That's important. Why is that the lives of the people waging the war are genuinely preserved? Why do the generals tend to outlast the war? That's a mystery that he raises. Even though they're not always like have an idea of modern generals sort of hide in the office, right?
No, but why do they survive in particular? Why is there a kind of officers' etiquette almost between both sides? As well.
These kind of things.
So we've got interrelational society in war, but what about international society? What does he say about war as a failure, perhaps, of international society?
Well, so he says that this is a mystery he actually raises prior to engaging with this particular litany of mysteries we've just gone through, but he raises the question of why is it that we've never been able to transcend the state of nature as a nation with respect to other nations. Yeah,
so this is a Hobbesian view, to make it clear, of the state of nature being extrapolated to the international sphere, isn't it? This is an idea that this isn't a Rousseauian view of the state of nature. What he maybe is suggesting is, why have we never reached a Rousseauian view of the state of nature on the international sphere? Why can we not live alongside harmoniously and effectively?
Yes.
But he's saying no.
But in very modern sort of phrasing, he asked me why has there not been like an international sort of in a relation of nation, like what we might call, why has there not been a UN? Why has there not been a European Union?
Which he's obviously contextually thinking of his home of Savoy,
of course,
invasion and kind of the sort of revolutionary conflicts that take place, and obviously then lead into Napoleonic conflict and conquest later on.
And now that there is a European Union and such things, and that we're quite fond of setting up these things, like Trump's just made a bordered peace. So this is now the stage at which politics operate. This is the level at which politics operates primarily.
And obviously even in the day, Kant had this idea of a kind of tribunal of reason that would be applied on an international sphere, the perpetual peace text. That would be an interesting
it should maybe study
peace, board of peace or tribunal of reason. Trump's tribunal of reason.
Exactly. So now that we have these things, this for the Christian historian, this raises new questions, or at least for the historian who takes providence seriously, this raises questions of what kind of stage are we in human history, in the human story, what new challenges are there, what new opportunities are there. I mean, this is a chance to find out whether we can make international diplomacy function.
Exactly.
But obviously Maistre predates all this, so.
And it contrasts with someone like Montaigne's view at the time that actually there would be a tyranny of custom, that sort of like there would be shared understandings and beliefs, but Michel de Montaigne is sort of suggesting on an international sphere that these things will mean that sort of people work hand in hand, that these customs will rise up, and it'll only be when there's really competing value sets that there will be conflict. Whereas for de Maistre, the failure of international society is that, can we say, really God permits failure?
Yes.
Yeah.
And perhaps he permits it because there is something about war that is necessary. That's
maybe
the direction in which the argument is going.
Maybe for moral discipline, Jack.
Maybe for moral discipline. But actually, quite specifically for the, and this is where we mentioned earlier, the question of the sort of the fetishization of suffering.
Yeah.
This is really where this problem comes up for Maistre.
Now,
and of course, preface Maistre with the fact that he's a literary mind, literary genius, frankly. This chapter is especially literary because we begin with this question of the divine function of war, and then suddenly the narrative transitions quite inexplicably to a commentary on the Psalms of David, and then finishes on some meditations about the meaning of the night. As the cloak of moral evil, but also the place where one encounters God in prayer. And then the narrative ends. And it's really weird, why did you put these things together side by side? He doesn't give you any explicit reason. That's just the way the narrative turns. And this is after he's just given this incredibly dramatic litany. War is divine, and for all these reasons.
It's cosmic law.
You read it, it feels like a drumbeat, and it's a cosmic law. It's a cosmic
because
law.
It pervades nature.
That pervades all of nature, because the animals are killing each other, the men kill the animals. Who's there to kill man? That's literally what he asks.
Man must also be killed by man.
Yes, this is how he sees it. This validates the cosmic unity. And he sees in these cycles of destruction something redemptive for the whole of human race. So there's always, because of sin, there's always got to be some price paid.
A violent law?
Yes.
And that moral beings then fulfill said law by doing this?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't pretend to fully understand the chapter. Because, I mean, it's bold, it's dramatic, it's provocative. Does he really believe this? I don't know.
I don't know, but I guess he definitely believes that war is a law of the world. Whether or not that means that there's a sort of violent law can be left to discussion. But we know that it produces supernatural effects. This idea we've mentioned a couple of times, glory seems to surround it mysteriously.
Yeah, that's another thing he points to. Glory is quite mysterious.
And outcomes, and obviously beyond his time, certainly defy human calculation and expectation.
Yes, indeed. So once the war begins, it's out of your hand. It's really a gamble. I mean,
it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs, and this is what we see.
I mean, people have this idea that we'll wage the war for so many months, maybe give or take 10%, and it never ends out this way. It so rarely ends out this way, because it's impossible to calculate all the possible eventualities and how people respond, and so I think we lose sight of this because we live in such a digitized age and we feel we have access to all the information. Right? I mean, maybe it's useful to to remind ourselves that, even in the 19th century, I mean, things are still just sent by letter. You've never been to Turkey. You don't know what Turkey is like. You can read Herodotus. That's a 2,000-year book, and that's a bit out of date. And maybe you have some traders who come in to your city and tell you a bit about it. Absolutely. You have a purely notional idea of all of these places.
True.
And governments and cultures. How that affects military planning as well. So,
can I jump off of the point of culture as well? Because also war from de Maistre seems to degrade some nations, but perhaps regenerate others. And you could see that maybe with the example of Spain. In the Reconquista, it clearly regenerates Spain. But the loss during the Armada of Spain and its empire begins to fall apart. Sort of clearly begins to lessen Spain's kind of agility and ability. So we can see that in action in just one example there, I think.
Indeed. So yeah, war is very mysterious. In this way, it's not human.
Yeah.
It is what Maistre is suggesting.
Yeah. As you said, it's
superhuman, superhuman.
So what about prayer, fear, and Christian distinctiveness in this? The war depends immediately on God, that Christians pray differently from pagans.
Yeah.
And then David's Psalms, Jack.
Yeah. I mean, it's really just, like I mentioned, a very inexplicable turn. I spent all the time trying to understand, from a literary criticism point of view, why does he write in this way?
Yeah.
Why does he turn the subject this way? You get some hints, so the conclusion of the comments on war is that nothing depends more on God than war, and so we should give thanks and praise and so forth. And so there's an element of resignation. So the conclusion of the study of providence is always going to be resignation, but especially in war. And he's almost using war as a symbolic image of some kind of cycle of violence, which is retributive and restorative. Divinely speaking, and most basically because it provides the basic context in which there is the kind of uncertainty,
terror mixed with hope,
an opportunity for ordinary people to do good in times that really try.
Yes, and sinful times, essentially.
Yes.
It's sin acknowledged, but trust or hope maintained in that. Yeah,
I mean, war is the ultimate evidence of the inevitable collapse of the city of man, of the impossibility of living a simple life, a life secluded from trouble, the impossibility of planning for the future. So war in many ways stands for the need for faith. It's the supreme evidence of the need for faith and hope and charity. All the theological virtues are there in that basic human reality.
And a need for prayer, Jack. An attempt to understand providence and maybe lead us into the night.
Right, yeah, so this is where it goes. So David, the Psalms of David are said to be a very distinctive form of prayer because it recognises not just a God that punishes, but a personal God to whom we can petition for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So we're not just he uses specific words which escape me, but there's something much infinitely more personal about the Christian God than the pagan gods. This whole which introduces a whole new dimension of forgiveness and repentance than mere sort of mechanical punishment and fate. One had a father in heaven. This is very new. So this is something David understands very well, and there are some very heart-rending psalms that explore this, but also psalms which delight in the beauty of nature. And so there's all these complex human experiences that are summarised in David's prayers. Why pray? Because prayer is the encounter with the supra-rational. So the uncertainty not in the negative but in the positive sense, the kind of uncertainty which we characterise with virtues, which we relate to virtuously, in faith, in hope, resulting in charity. So this is what prayer is, first and foremost, is to establish within yourself a positive moral relationship to the unknown. Ultimately, war is the highest test of that.
Of doing so.
David is preeminent example. He's a king, a leader in war, a man also who was guilty of many terrible things. We had these in the gospel readings in mass in recent weeks. Actually, the life of David. You remember Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah? He sees a woman bathing on the roof, and it happens to be the wife of one of his generals or something, and he's tempted. He sleeps with her. And then it sets off a chain reaction where rather than repent, he decided to make sure that he gets his general killed on the battlefield because he's going to orchestrate an advance and then have everyone else retreat and leave him to be killed.
Yeah.
And a few other people die in the process, actually. It's an event that snowballs. Anyway, and then David has an incredible story of repentance and described by God as a man after my own heart. And the Psalms and the Testament, they're literally so beautiful.
Well, he played a song and it pleased the Lord.
Yes, indeed. And also what's remarkable about the Psalms is they're very accessible. It's not like, it's not Ovid.
Yeah.
It's not elite poetry. It's folk music, but it's also much richer than that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they sang the lyre and all this.
Yeah.
And it's liturgy, and it's worship, and it's prayer, and all these things. And finally, Maistre talks about the night, because the night is another symbol of the uncertainty. Yeah. And it's the same, and the night has a double function. It's the cloak that we seek to mask over our vices. We commit crimes in the dark, we fornicate in the dark. But we also make love in the dark, and and ultimately we seek out God in the dark.
Exactly. So it's epistemic and moral.
Yes. So there's something very narrow about the mysteries we're dealing with. I mean, Christ talks about the straight and narrow path. The reason for this is that good and evil aren't opposed to one another in any obvious symbolic sense.
They are.
They are. Like, yes, they are. But I mean, in practice, it only takes a very subtle deviation to fall into sin. Yeah. A deviation of intent. So, and this is sort of when you're trying to peer into the mysteries of the divine, it very easily goes wrong. And this is sort of why the night is quite interesting as a symbol. Yeah. So when we're trying to understand war, this is a knife's edge, really. Yeah. And the answer again is resignation and prayer. It's being led. It's not forcing your way into these mysteries.
This is fascinating, and we can really see Maistre as this critical anti-Enlightenment figure. And I mean, the stuff about the night, well, the night is, an intriguing concept. I mean, whether it be Adam Smith going off walking through his, out of his house in Kirkcaldy in the middle of the night in his pyjamas and slippers, and coming up with these amazing ideas and walking for miles in the cold and the snow. The way that the night has an impact on thinkers is
real.
It's very interesting. It's interesting that he actually tackles it as a direct concept.
And then try to unite all of these things together. I mean, it's hard to express, but I think it has something to do with trying to wrestle with the core existential mysteries and deriving from them the needs for Christian virtues and practices.
Completely.
Which are universal.
And I think obviously war and suffering we've seen resist rationalisation. Both force a recognition of the supernatural. We're seeing this kind of interplay with prayer and the night. And I mean, I think he stands out as a very unique figure. I probably am less persuaded as a much more of an Enlightenment rationalist than perhaps you are, Jack. But I don't know whether you'd have any closing points, any roundup points.
I mean, I think it is worth saying. I mean, I don't necessarily. Maistre is remarkable, but I find it difficult to follow him on certain points.
Yeah.
I appreciate the general gist of what he's trying to say, but I think the literary fervour goes a bit too far in trying to understand what is suffering and this cosmic law of retribution. And it's all a bit. I mean, I think one of the important things for an understanding of an authentic Christianity, I think, is that at some level, freedom becomes quite important. Now, how exactly that will be manifest in a life in relationship to God is complicated. But there's something about this narrative he pursues that could really start to undermine our sense of agency. But then also, maybe he's not so far off, because at the end of the day, this is the situation we find ourselves in. The world is, phenomenologically speaking, the world is characterised basically by uncertainty and chaos. And we adopt conceptual schemes that simplify
to try and rationalise it and to try and
and they are broken all the time in small ways or in fundamental ways. And the point is, you need to know that that's possible and how to deal with it. And this is where prayer comes from.
Yeah, no, very good. It's really interesting because a lot of these ideas come from de Maistre, I guess, reflecting on the revolutions in France.
Yes.
And next time, we'll be turning to Reflections on the Revolution in France by Edmund Burke, and some of his verboseness, some of his storytelling that de Maistre engages in. It's quite romantic.
Yes.
We'll also be covering the romantics there too, so you better stay tuned for that episode. But I really hope you've enjoyed, Jack. That was fantastic. A really good walkthrough of a very complex and probably quite esoteric figure for many. But we hope it's elucidated some of counter-Enlightenment thought at its most radical, really, I'd say. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Sam.